Story 1. There's something wrong with my sister. I can still remember it as if it happened yesterday, even though it's been decades. Halloween night in our small, quiet neighborhood was always a special occasion. The anticipation of dressing up and collecting candy was enough to make any kid's heart race with excitement. My story happened back in the late 90s. I was just a young boy back then, and my older sister had promised to take me trick-or-treating. Little did I know that this Halloween would terrify me for years to come. We headed out just as the sun was about to set, and I remember there being an electricity in the air. I guess part of it was excitement, and part of it was fear, because I was still a little boy, and could still get scared quite easily. My sister dressed as a witch, and had the entire outfit head to toe. She even had a witch's mask, with the pointy nose and everything. She held my hand tightly as we knocked on doors and yelled, "Trick or treat." We went door to door, and I scooped up as much candy as I could get my hands on. About 45 minutes in, we got separated for a brief moment. When I finally caught up to her, I asked her where she had been, but she just looked at me. I didn't think much of it, and grabbed her hand, and we continued going door to door for about 15 or 20 more minutes. As we continued trick-or-treating, something felt off about her. She wasn't speaking much, and her movements were just weird. Honestly, I thought maybe she saw somebody she didn't like, or saw a boy she did like with someone else or something. I honestly didn't know. When we returned home, she was still acting weird. My parents were in the garage handing out candy, so I ran up to them and showed them how much I had gathered. My sister just kind of stood around and didn't talk. My sister had always been full of energy, but something was up and she was eerily quiet. Her and I went inside and left my parents to finish up handing out candy. My sister moved slowly into the kitchen. I remember her taking really slow steps and just looking around. It was so creepy. I went into the living room to tend to my candy. I was snacking away, just eating candy, when I asked my sister if she was ever going to take off her costume. At least take that hideous mask off. When I didn't get a response, I turned around and she was standing directly behind me, just staring at me, motionless. At this point, I was part creeped out and part annoyed. Part of me told me that she was really going the extra mile to creep me out, and the other part told me that something was really off. Just then I could hear some loud talking coming from the garage where my parents were. I turned back around, and a few seconds later they bolted through the door. Looking part terrified and part panicked, they looked at me and asked who was with me. I was confused, and gave them that kind of look like, "What are you talking about?" Just then, my sister, with her mask off, walked in behind them. My eyes got really wide and I was so confused. I turned around and whoever was behind me that I thought was my sister was gone. In the kitchen, the door that led to the backyard was wide open. My parents were in a panic and started searching all around the house. Whoever it was never found. What's even creepier is that we later found that a knife was missing from the knife block, and we were never able to find it. To this day, I tell myself that it really was just my sister, and she had just snuck out the back door and came around to the garage. But she swears it wasn't. She said that she lost me and couldn't find me, and so she just came home, and that's where she found me. There are still so many questions, though. If it wasn't my sister, who the hell was it and what were their intentions? If it wasn't her, how was it then that whoever it was could have had the same exact costume that my sister was wearing? Where in the hell did that knife go? As a grown man now, it's a mystery that still gives me chills to think about all these years later.
Story 2. This dress comes with a story. I had always been drawn to the unusual, the offbeat, the things that had a story to tell. So when I stumbled onto an old vintage shop on the corner of a street in a nearby town that I was visiting, I couldn't resist stepping inside. It was a dusty, dimly lit place. It had vintage everything, antique furniture, and a host of knickknacks that had seen better days. As I browsed through, a beautiful Victorian-era looking gown caught my eye. It didn't look like it was an actual dress from the Victorian era, but it was certainly a good replica, so I believed. I thought to myself, this could make an excellent Halloween costume. I looked at the price tag, just $10. I was sold. There was an elderly shop owner and she smiled at me as I held up the dress at the register. "That's a special one," she said. "Comes with a story." I obliged her to tell me more. It's said to be cursed, belonged to a woman named Evelyn who lived in this town decades ago. She wore it to a Halloween party, but something terrible happened that night. No one knows what, but she disappeared without a trace, and the dress was all they found. I honestly chuckled a little bit. My first thought was, well, that's not a very good pitch from someone trying to sell something to me. But honestly, like I said, the woman was elderly, and so I blew it off and told her I'd take my chances. She smiled and rang me up. After I returned home with the dress, I decided to tuck it away in my closet. To keep it separate from my everyday clothes, I placed it all the way on the left side. Or so I thought I did. The next day, I opened my closet door to find the dress had mysteriously migrated to the right side. I was sure I had put it on the left, and this small but eerie change freaked me out. It was the first in a series of strange occurrences that started happening. I began hearing noises in the dead of night, strange creaks and bumps that would wake me up. Stuff around the house seemed to be out of place too. Not big stuff, just little stuff that made me feel like I was going crazy. When Halloween night finally arrived, I reluctantly decided to wear the dress. Ever since I brought it home, it had been giving me the creeps. But it was Halloween now, and it was time to wear it. From the moment I put it on, I didn't feel like myself. I felt so emotional. I just felt dread and paranoia. I went to a Halloween party and felt like someone was following me the entire night. I was a mess. Even my friends were asking what was up with me. I tried to make the best of the night, but I really just wanted to get home and sleep it off. After I got home, I cleaned up and went to bed. That night I had a horrific nightmare. In the dream, I was at a party, just like a party that I really had been at that night. But in the dream, I was walking home alone for some reason. I was walking down a secluded dirt road when I felt something behind me. At first, there was nothing, but as I continued to walk, I began hearing footsteps. I turned around and there was a dark figure. He was approaching and I was terrified. I began to run, but I wasn't fast enough. He caught up to me, and just as he was reaching out to grab me, I screamed and woke up. I was in a cold sweat and tears were coming out of my eyes. I've never been one to believe in curses, but something told me that the dress had something to do with everything that was going on. I wanted to get rid of it. My first thought was, what would I say to the elderly woman? "Hey, turns out this dress really is cursed. I'd like to return it." I feel like I would have looked so silly. I also felt that if there was something going on with it, I didn't want to pass it on to someone else. So the next day, I drove out to a dumpster and threw it away. Almost immediately, things returned to normal. The paranoia that had been following me was gone and things went back to the way they were before I bought that dress. No more noises at night, no things shuffling around, no more feeling like I'm being followed. I'll never be able to say with 100% certainty that everything had to do with the dress, but I can say that ever since I got rid of it, things have been back to normal. I've learned my lesson. If someone ever tells me that something comes with a story, I think next time I probably won't take my chances on it.
Thanks for tuning into another episode from the Alley of Nightmares. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, subscribe, and share with all your friends. Until next time,